Congregation will now be received. My text this morning is drawn from a book that had great impact on me as a young minister, a book called it's Called to Commitment by Elizabeth O'Connor, which was published way back in 1963. And the words of this text are both hers and mine. A kind of conversation I've had with O'Connor, which over the years has shaped my sense of what ministry and religious fellowship are about. First, one must come to understand that the real issue is always an internal one. The temptation is always to focus on what is wrong out there. Perhaps a prophetic voice is needed. But if that voice has the power to heal, it will come as of old from within the community. Often the need is not at all for a prophet. The need is for the person who can ask what she or he must do to be the one through whom new life breaks. If we are to follow visions, we cannot be overly concerned with what our church is not doing. We may, in fact, need to put practical, institutional, and budget concerns aside. Following a vision means that which is not seen by our ordinary daily lives. It means a willingness to be out there in a strange land, confident that we will find company there, or that company will find us. That is, with the faith that one day another will join us, and then another, and a vision will become clothed, which means for all to see. This summer has been a time of trial for me, and I guess I want you to know it. I want you to know my frame of mind and what has cast me into that state I'm in, because I suspect that it's not unique to me by any means, because I suspect that you share it at different levels and different ways for each of us, but at some level, and that it is a phenomenon of this present moment, this present era, in which the dominant theme is the vulnerability and precariousness of our world. Certainly on this 10th anniversary of 9/11, you and I can confront this reality, at least for a moment. 9/11 is perhaps the perfect metaphor for the present condition of things. The reality is that we may be living in what in religion has traditionally been thought of as the end times. That is to say, we may be living at the end of history as we have known it and assumed it would always be. We've assumed that the earth will continue to support life as it has in the past, including preeminently our own human life, and that the natural world, pretty much as it's been, will roll on around us, that human beings will continue to seek their well-being in that world. That as usual, some will seek as much well-being as they possibly can accumulate for themselves, and some will be inspired to seek well-being for their brothers and sisters and live a life dedicated to the common good and the salvation of life and of all God's creatures, great and small. That's really what the church is about. I'm not saying that we are at the end of history of the past 5,000 years, but only that there is increasing evidence that we may be. Global warming, taken just by itself, threatens the end of the earth as we've known it, on which human history, our history, has had its arc and narrative. The growing political polarization between right and left, and geopolitically between East and West, and between various religious groups that consider themselves the only true religion, some of which are part of huge and dangerous theocracies. The breakdown of civility generally, the mean-spirited blogs on the internet, the retreat from neighborliness as people next to us on the bus take refuge behind their earpods, the widespread, evident, deteriorating confidence in the basic institutions of our collective life, public education, for example, or health care, or American industry, loss of confidence in governance itself at different levels, local, regional, national, international. Let's suppose, just for the purpose of considering what it would mean, that we actually are, in this sense at least, in the end times, at the end of an entire epoch of our history. What does it mean to be a church in such times of extremity? What really matters for us as a religious community in such times? If we can raise and address these questions, then perhaps we can better know what we here are about as a congregation, whether or not the end times are actually upon us. Whither are we tending? Whither should we go? Why might we go in this direction rather than that one? And can we make a difference? Does it matter? Why does it matter? The one central thing I've tried to say to you in various ways since I began my ministry with you 2 years ago is, but wait, let me step back a bit and remind you that you brought me in as a consulting minister. I'm not your regular settled minister. You brought me in as a consulting minister to help you with certain specific purposes, including especially growth. It's interesting that the UUA has recently begun designating ministers like me in this category as development ministers. And if you read the materials, you see that development means primarily growth in numbers. And here at the Beverly Unitarian Church, we've been working on this. I mean, I think to an impressive extent for any congregation. We've been working diligently in the direction of growth. We've been bringing fresh ideas and energy to it. Christy heads up our church development task force, and this task force and the board and the new publicity committee and the OWL task force and the Green Sanctuary and the social action committee and the membership committee have all, in their various ways, directed their best efforts to our being a growing congregation. And let me hasten to add and I do believe it's true, not for the sake of growth, but in order to have more influence in extending the values of free religion in our larger community. And we really mean it when we invoke the mantra, nurture the spirit, help heal the world. It's on our big banner out here. It's what everyone sees as they drive by. We are earnestly seeking ways to make this mantra manifest. I'm not suggesting otherwise. At the same time, a central hope has been, understandably, that we will simply grow in numbers, just become a bigger church with the financial capacity to do the things that bigger churches do. Call a full-time minister, for example. Have the wherewithal to improve our facility here as our architects have laid it out for us. And so on. Okay, now with this context of the reason for and definition of my coming here as your consulting minister, now called development minister, back to the sentence I began a few minutes ago. The one thing I've tried to say to you in various ways since I began here 2 years ago is that you should like yourself as you are. Like yourself as you are. That being a small fellowship of free religion is just fine. And that you could be just fine on this scale forever. Provided, and I've always included this proviso, or at least meant to, so I know you'll recognize it when I repeat it, provided that you give your first attention to substantive development, to the spiritual enrichment of your internal life together. That you focus on clarity and definition and support of the basic faith that undergirds us in our freedom, and on how it directs us to the development of community here within our gathered fellowship, and produces a fellowship committed to mutual caring and to the common good of the community at large, even unto the healing of the entire world, insofar as our own finite efforts can be magnified in concert with the finite efforts of all such persons and groups of persons, but with the focus being, again, on confronting with clarity the actual human condition today and the condition of the whole earth, and how we need to gird ourselves to be relevant under these conditions, how we might act with creative faithfulness in such a world, just as who and what we are on our present scale. In other words, how we can best become persons and a fellowship of persons seeking to live our lives intentionally for our mutual benefit and for the benefit of all.